So previously, what we covered as part of our educational series for using medical cannabis is edibles for wellness. In that particular webinar, we covered what are edibles, recipes, how to decarboxylate cannabis, and basically how cannabis can be used for dosing and titration. What we're going to be talking about today in our webinar is finding relief using medical cannabis for veterans and first responders. Specifically, what we're going to talk about is how to legally obtain medical cannabis, talk about employment, firearms, legislature, and also the different terpenes that can be used for various conditions that we run into, like PTS, arthritis, sleep issues, pain management, stress, anxiety, that type of thing. So let's jump right into it. First question is, how do you obtain a medical cannabis card? Manny, you have some experience with this.
I absolutely do. Thank you, Mark. So it's not as daunting as some people would think or suggest. It's basically a new system to most who deal with insurance and otherwise that's really streamlined. This is a few steps that you have to take in order to qualify in the state of Florida. First out is finding out how do you qualify. There's a list of certain diagnoses that you can see online and see that if you fall under one of those, you definitely qualify. However, that list is not the all-ending list. If you have similar or like conditions to the symptoms of those diagnoses, you could be qualified as well. Then you would
And
have,
I also might want to point out, Manny, that over here there's a website, mmtcfl.com/survey, that if you go there, you can fill out a survey and it'll tell you if you qualify for a medical cannabis card or not.
and that's the most easiest way. And there's really no reason for anybody not to qualify, as it is a recommendation, not a prescription, but we'll get into that later. You can also get an initial appointment with the physician through that survey with MMTC. You can also shop around if there's not an MMTC near you. You go see the physician. They will assist you after qualifying you and putting you into the state registry, how to apply for your card through the state registry. And that's something that has to be done on your end of it as the patient. But most clinics, particularly MMTC, will walk you through that process. And if you're a Florida resident, you will be approved within minutes and go shopping right after your appointment if you wanted to. If you're a seasonal resident, meaning you live in the state of Florida for at least 30 days or more, then you can qualify, but it can take up to 10 business days for that application to be processed. Once you are approved, you won't get your card right away, but you can use your Florida state ID or driver's license, or even out of state if you're a seasonal resident and already approved, to go to any local dispensary and be able to purchase using your patient ID number, which is received right after you're approved through the Medical Marijuana Use Registry or the MMUR.
And I think your doctor will give you that P number at your appointment.
Yes, absolutely. You can get a printout, you'll have it in your email, but you can also have it recorded by your physician or the physician's assistants that are there in the office. And one key thing to remember is that you have to renew every 7 months or every 210 days equitably, and that can cost a certain fee with your clinic, usually less than your initial fee, and then you have to pay nothing to the state for 1 year.
Right.
Now, some of the frequently asked questions: what is the difference between a recommendation and a prescription, like I was mentioning? Well, prescription is basically where they're going to give you just that, a prescription on what to get, how to take it, what dosage, and how frequently. Whereas a recommendation is saying, yes, we recommend for you to go and try cannabis in order to meet your needs for your diagnoses or your symptoms. It's not concrete, and it is a personal journey where we suggest that everybody journals at least at the beginning when you're starting to see what products work for you at what time of day. And we can go further into detail on that later.
And I think one of the things you and I have talked about, Manny, is a lot of the dispensaries here in Florida will actually do a consultation with you to help you identify the actual products that they have that can work for your condition.
Absolutely. Pre-COVID, it was pretty much a guaranteed thing that as soon as you walk in, you were getting a consultation. Post-COVID, it's gone away as far as the expectation, but the services are still there. All you have to do is say, can I sit down with somebody and have a consultation? Every dispensary in the state of Florida is required to have a consultation room for privacy, although you don't have to go into that room for privacy if you feel comfortable speaking out in public. But no appointments needed. You can walk in and get that consultation as you're shopping. I'm sorry?
Two things about this was to take away. Sometimes it's very confusing about the 210 days and a year long. People get angry when their 210 day recommendation runs out, but their card still says they're valid because they don't quite understand it. Get a lot of calls like that. And, we also help people navigate that MMUR first qualification. So if anybody needs help, we're there to help them get through that too.
Jeff, and also if you have a situation where you need to increase your limit, you can do that.
I'm really glad that they did that in the last couple of years. So people that, require more maybe oral medication or more inhalation medication, they can get that through an exemption.
Great.
And it's not very hard. It's been, I'm not sure now the way things are going, how fast it happens, but normally within a week, I would think.
Now, what's interesting is the VA and also American Legion have been working for years sponsoring different bills to be able to really bring cannabis in the forefront and make it legal.
Yeah. Actually, even there are other veterans groups like the Veteran Action Group that was just up on the Hill fighting for our rights. But yes, the American Legion and the VFW have been pouring thousands and thousands of dollars into research, but nothing ever seems to get resolved or pushed forward. Some American Legions will talk about cannabis. Some of them are completely against it. So it's a weird landscape right now, and the way things are going, I don't really know how this is going to turn out. HB 83 is a current initiative to help first responders. There was a case in Hillsborough County where a first responder was given his job back after he had a positive urinalysis screening for THC because he was a medical cannabis patient. So,
well, I think the most important thing to point out right now, here we are in literally in March 2025. And I would say that we're in a situation where we just flatly, with all the announcement that's been going on about the restructuring that the administration is trying to do at the federal government and rumors that they're going to lay off people like 80,000 VA workers, we just don't know what's going on. I mean, this is an area where so many things are up in the air. I think this brings a lot of anxiety and stress to a lot of veterans.
And actually, we don't know if it's going to be a positive change or no change or a negative change. I mean, it could be hands off. Who knows? There could be enough things cut away that, at some point they're not even concerned about it. I don't know.
Yeah.
But
I think it's important to point out that the actual organizations themselves, American Legion and VFWs, have taken proactive steps to really bring cannabis to the forefront.
Yeah.
That's an important part. Now, when we talk about first responders and medical cannabis, Manny, you had some comments about this, about drug-free workplaces and court cases.
Yes. So right now, there's really no protections in the state of Florida. For first responders, VA, or whatever position you may be in. However, most of the times they won't drug test or submit you to a drug test unless there's an incident. And in that case, then they would do it just to see that, make sure that you weren't under the influence. And that's one of the biggest problems with cannabis, is because it can stay in your system anywhere from a few days to over 30 days. Considering your usage and what you're using. And you may not have had anything that day where an incident occurred. However, it's still in your system and you test positive. So that's one of the hurdles that we're trying to get over.
There's a lot of people that say, well, I'm just going to use broad spectrum CBD. Broad spectrum CBD means it has very low, if no THC in it. And I'll just use that and I'll test okay. And the problem is, even if you use just CBD, you could test positive for using cannabis.
100%. When I was a unit protection leader in the military, and come to find out, the military actually has a higher threshold than the civilian sector does for that nanograms that you can have in your body. However, it's still very low, and just as you suggested or mentioned, using over-the-counter broad-spectrum products or from a dispensary can cause you to test positive. However, there's no euphoric effect or anything from it whatsoever.
It's kind of all really up to, in these situations, where you might be working, and if you're represented by a union or whatever their HR restrictions might be. Because I know people in very functioning positions, in the medical field and whatnot, that have been subject to a urinalysis screening and have been contacted about their level of nanograms. And then the medical professional stated, well, I have a medical card. And then on the other end, the screener said, well, then you may or may not be contacted by your employer. And that was the end of it right there, because they were just trying to find out, like, oh, do you realize that this is happening? And then in some other instances, the union rep has negotiated your analysis or drug screening to exclude THC, like they do with some other drugs, and that's how they get around that. To work, be able to work. So
it's important to work with your union rep and just be aware that really employers are not required to allow medical cannabis use. I think that's important to really point out. Now, let's talk a little bit about traveling with medical cannabis. I know, Manny, you've addressed this many times when you were working in the clinic, in the actual dispensaries.
I have, and I was even privy to do a presentation for the Pensacola Police Department over here in the Panhandle, which TSA agents actually attended as well. But I'll start from the beginning. Driving in Florida is legal as long as you have it properly stored. And what I mean by that, it has to be in the original container that it was sold in, with the affixed label of your personal information identifying you as the card holder. And you don't want to have it in the front seat. You don't want to have it open, kind of like when you're driving with alcohol. When you're flying, it is completely illegal to go onto any federal property, let alone fly on planes with cannabis or medical marijuana, because it is federal property and the federal government deems it without any medicinal use a Schedule I narcotic, hence it's illegal. Now, TSA agents that I've spoken to would mention that all they do is have an amnesty box and throw it away as long as it's identifiable. They're not looking for your medicine, they're looking for threats to the plane. I personally will not fly with flour or anything like that, simply because of the catch-22 that lies in the gray area there. However, I have gone with like little gummies or edibles or something that will get me to where I'm going, unless I'm going to another area where it's legal recreationally, as medical marijuana is not reciprocal. And that goes into crossing state lines. You can't cross state lines. That's interstate travel, which is federally regulated. And then each state has their own laws where it may not be medicinally legal, let alone recreationally legal. So
and it's very much like alcohol, where alcohol is regulated state by state.
Absolutely. So you want to be very cautious with that. Although most of the DAs have kind of withdrawn back as long as you have a medical card. To your point, as you were saying earlier, Jeff, having that card does give you some protections. It at least lets the officials know that you're using it medicinally. As long as you're not carrying 100,000 grams or something like that across state lines, then it's pretty obvious. And then lastly, firearms and cannabis. You can carry both at once. However, you don't want to, just like having alcohol with your weapon, it can lead to additional legal risks. So you always want to keep it separate. I'm a concealed carry holder. However, I can't remember the last time I carried my weapon because I'm always having cannabis with me for my medicinal purposes. And I do that just for safety precautions.
Sure. And again, cannabis is treated much like alcohol and other things, where you just got to be careful with it and really worry about carrying it about across straight lines. And I'm going to emphasize TSA, when you go to the airport, that's federal space. So just be careful. It's something people don't really realize.
This slide right here is important information for everyone. If you're gonna remember anything, remember this slide right here, because even though there is gray areas, you are afforded some legal transportation. And as Manny said, he won't fly with flour. I have personally flown with packaged flour that they actually touched and put back in my bag, but I wouldn't recommend it.
I'd be cool about that right now.
Yeah, I wouldn't recommend it. And it was something I probably shouldn't have done, but that I too spoke with the TSA, and that they reiterated that they're not looking for personal use cannabis. But if you're packaged up with a few ounces or something, you're going to get in trouble.
Yeah, you throw that in your bag, or you throw that vape pen in a tray. You're forcing them to do something.
Yes, you're forcing them to. Yes, exactly.
You don't want to do that.
The carrying both at once, that's the best, advice you can give anybody. It's the same thing as if you're on narcotics or anything else. You can't be walking around with your weapon. It's just obvious, but it goes good to say and remember that.
So let me jump into the area of gun control, because a lot of people are concerned about whether you can carry a gun or own a gun while you have medical cannabis. And the answer is you can. There's no rules that prevent you from owning a gun when you are using or you have a license to use medical cannabis. However, The problem that comes into play is when you go to purchase a gun, because when you go to do that, you need to answer no on the form, the ATF form. And if you answer yes, which is you're using medical cannabis, what can happen is that they can deny you getting your weapon, or being able to block you from being able to purchase that particular weapon. Jeff, you've seen that in certain cases, haven't you?
Yes, but it's just, I think it's more than that. Like, I don't want to lie on the federal form, so I won't buy a weapon from a federally licensed gun dealer, but I've been to estate sales where I could purchase a weapon there without a problem.
Yeah.
And you can, just like in Florida, you can legally register your weapon and still have your cannabis card. So just like with the VFW, the American Legion, and the TSA, there's a lot of gray area in all this. And the best thing is to try and use your most common sense about what you're doing,
Sure.
when you're doing it.
Right. And it should be pointed out that although the federal laws are in place, there have been appeals and there have been laws in 2022, 2023, and 2024 really challenging that law, where the actual challenges have shown that you can own a gun and be on medical cannabis at the same time. Now, all of those challenges to the federal law are under appeal right now. So you still can't go out and buy a gun. But the point is, the legal process has been very consistent the last couple of years, and is in process right now to look at, we can overturn that legislation.
Yes.
So that we can be treated very much like alcohol or other substances.
I think that would be great if any one of these three went.
Yeah. So there is light at the end of the tunnel, but again, it's the legal process and it's very slow moving. So I just don't want people to go out tomorrow and go try to think they can go buy a gun because of these let's just say these cases that have been put in place. But the process is in place. So Manny, tell me about one of the things that's happening right now. There's been a lot of talk about rescheduling cannabis on the federal level.
There is. As I stated before, cannabis or marijuana is considered a Schedule 1 narcotic, defined as having no medical value and high for potential abuse. Most people who've been using cannabis or marijuana can speak to the opposite of that very clearly. Abuse is basically when you can't get over it, or if you're using it too much, it hinders your work life, your regular life. That's abuse, and I have yet to see that happen. It's more often that something has happened that family members will associate to marijuana or cannabis, and it gets that stigma. However, it is being suggested to be Schedule 3. Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah. And these are the schedules, and these are the different let's just say drugs that are in each of those schedules. Now, I should point out, cannabis is not a drug. Cannabis is a plant that acts as a medicine. A drug is something that is actually manufactured. As you can see, most of these products like Tylenol and those types of things are manufactured. But the point is, it has to be scheduled. And right now, the issue is it's really Schedule 1. Is that correct?
Yes, it's a Schedule 1. And to your point, Mark, it is a plant. It is not adulterated. It's not a synthetic. Now, there are synthetic THC and CBDs out there that are used for epilepsy, cancer, and other things. But the reason that hasn't taken off the way most would think in the pharmacopoeia world is because it's an isolate, and it's a synthetic without any terpenes or the entourage effect. So bringing this down to Schedule 3, the plant itself, not the synthetic formulations that pharmacopoeia has come up with, makes sense. However, it shouldn't even be scheduled, in my opinion.
Well, of course, I feel the same way, because even if you look at what a Schedule 4 drug is Xanax and Valium and, Tramadol, give me a break. It doesn't need to be scheduled at all. Rescheduling might be just the beat the drum loud enough to quiet the voices, but it doesn't really do much for us.
Yeah. And I should point out that when Nixon had his attorney general go out and really study medical cannabis, his objective was to prove that medical cannabis was bad for you, or cannabis in general, I should say, is bad for you. There was a 1,184-page report produced, and the conclusion after 3 different studies was it shouldn't be scheduled at all, which goes back to what you were saying, Jeff. That's what the attorney general was saying. Now, Nixon went 180 degrees in the opposite direction and made it Schedule 1 for political reasons, not for scientific or medical reasons, which is very interesting. And I think in the case of, especially when it comes to veterans and first responders, I think we should get back on the issue of science and medicine to really help these folks out. I really think that we need to take politics out of that, because we have people that have given their bodies and their lives to really help us. And I think that's what we should be doing, is to help them.
I think part of this scheduling thing here all is due to the culture that was cannabis in the 60s, or that is cannabis now. That stigma of the cannabis culture, people have a different idea of that instead of cannabis as medicine.
Right.
And that's kind of why I always say, we on the back of my business card since I started, we always try to promote change through education. I can't just stand there and tell you I need weed. I need to explain to you why the Navy sent me home on Vicodin, oxycodone, Xanax, Valium, all that stuff.
Right.
And now I use cannabis. So to understand what we've been talking about over the last 10 or 15 minutes, and to see this, Lyrica, a Schedule 5 drug, pregabalin is another name for it. That was the hardest medication for me to come off of, and it's supposed to be non-habit forming. Well, it's not something that I yearned to take, but my body reacted in such a way that I would get brain zaps, and my mind and thoughts wouldn't catch up to the way I was moving. I felt like I was within myself. Just a whole bunch of different weird side effect feelings from coming off of that drug. That to me, it's ridiculous to have marijuana at the top and Lyrica at the bottom. That's just,
That's a good point. I think the thing we should be pointing out, though, is right now there is movement afoot, or where there was movement afoot in the last administration to really reschedule cannabis. I think right now it's, again, as we mentioned in a lot of other cases, it's very foggy as to what's going to go on, because although these processes are in place, it's not sure that they're going to come to fruition.
But this also reaches even deeper to give some insight on the dispensaries and the supply chain, if you will. As it suggested, the Schedule 1 keeps dispensaries from being able to get certain bank accounts or credit terminals or debit terminals and such. And that's why if you are a patient and you're shopping, you'll notice that most dispensaries are switching out their terminals every few months because they get closed out, or for whatever federal reason, they're not able to do it. It also makes it very difficult to cultivate and do other things as a seed to sale state, everything being done within state, which is that cost goes down to the patient. And so that's why descheduling it completely would be most beneficial. But even getting it down to the Schedule 3 would open up the doors, not only for the patients, but for also the supply chain.
Absolutely. Right. You're absolutely correct. Yeah.
That rescheduling is it's going to sit down and talk to 3 different departments. It's going to take a year, maybe 2 years to happen if it goes forward. So it's not something that's going to happen tomorrow, but the process is in place and it's starting. I just hope it just continues with the momentum that it had coming out from the last administration. It's there. So let's talk a little bit about rescheduling. Let's just kind of summarize everything. When you talk about rescheduling to Schedule 3, Manny, how does it affect your federally prescribed drugs and also firearms?
Well, this is a very, very broad topic, because moving into Schedule 3, as it suggests, to be federally prescribed, which means that you can find suppliers throughout the states in order to fill those prescriptions. So the supply and the demand is really going to have to balance out first before even that could be considered. But this will keep the same way as far as I know, as firearm restrictions, because of the fact, just as it stands now, when you're using certain medications, you are not to use your firearm. However, it will change the application requirement. So you can actually fill out the federal application and still get a weapon as if it was any other Schedule 3 or lower product.
Right. So stay tuned to the rescheduling. Like I say, it's going to be a slower process. It's going to be a year or two, and we hope it continues. I know there are hearings coming up. I just hope that they still happen and they don't get canceled. So we'll see exactly what's going on out there. So let's talk a little bit about how cannabis can help with your particular medical condition.
These are the building blocks of cannabis. So you're going to have cannabinoids, terpenes, and flavonoids. So cannabinoids, the most common ones that you think about when you think about cannabinoids are going to be THC, which is the psychoactive part of the cannabis plant, and then you have CBD, which is the non-psychoactive part of the cannabis plant. And they're both very, very important cannabinoids that show up in large quantities naturally in the cannabis plant. There are so many terpenes. This is just an example of 3 of the more common terpenes that you might find. Terpenes are what's going to give cannabis its smell and its taste, but just like you said, it is going to, the terpenes will provide a lot of the medical benefits that you actually get from the cannabis plant. As noted in this list here, terpenes are heat sensitive, so the temperature at which you use products can affect the action. So the entourage effect is what we expect to happen when the cannabinoids, terpenes, and flavonoids are all working together in your body to provide a full range of benefits from the cannabis plant. So instead of just isolating cannabinoids or terpenes, when we put them all together, they work better together. These are the big 8. So these are terpenes that you would find in larger quantities in naturally occurring cannabis. There are other terpenes that you'll find in smaller amounts, but these are definitely the ones that are most prominent.
But here are the different terpenes that are out there. Each of these address a particular symptom and effect. We're actually able to chart that. And this is very important to being able to determine what products to use or which terpenes to use for each of the conditions. Amy, let's spend a moment and actually talk about that a little bit. Start with arthritis.
Yeah, certainly. So with arthritis, we're expecting symptoms like joint pain, redness. They might have some minor swelling or sensation of heat in the joint or around the joint. So we have some specific terpenes that we look at to actually address those specific symptoms. For the pain relieving part of it, pretty much every terpene is going to provide pain relieving properties. Same thing with anti-inflammatory. But if we're looking at something like needing a muscle relaxer, say to just help with some of that inflammation and relax the muscles a little bit to give some relief for arthritis or muscle spasms that might be happening because of arthritis, we might be looking at a terpene called myrcene. And the cool thing is that helps with muscle relaxation, which can be really important for treating arthritis.
So let's talk about sleep. A lot of people turn to cannabis to help them not only fall asleep, but stay asleep.
Yeah, absolutely. So sleep is one of those things, we can't live without it, but it's kind of hard for some people to achieve. We do know that there are some terpenes that have sedating properties, and those are going to be really excellent for falling asleep. So the couple that I always recommend are going to be linalool, myrcene, and terpinolene. Those are very sedating terpenes, and so it makes it a little bit easier to get to sleep because of the long time that it does take for some cannabis products to process through your body, like for example, the edibles or the tinctures. We do expect those sedating effects to then last quite a long time, which is super helpful for staying asleep.
Yeah, that's good.
When we are addressing pain, a big thing is we're really looking at reducing inflammation throughout the body. As you can see from this chart, every single terpene that we know of that is naturally occurring in the cannabis plant is going to help with inflammation throughout the body. As it's addressing inflammation, it's usually targeting kind of the root cause of a lot of pain that patients might be having. So if we can address inflammation, we're also addressing pain.
Same thing applies to stress and anxiety.
Absolutely. So, with stress and anxiety, patients might experience headaches, some high blood pressure. They might have a sensation of chest pain or heart palpitations. They can also get skin rashes. And oftentimes anxiety is also common with sleep disturbances. When we start looking at what terpenes we would want to use for that, we'd be looking at limonene, linalool, myrcene, and caryophyllene. Each of those specific terpenes are going to do a little bit different things, but the big things is they're going to elevate the mood. They're going to reduce stress and anxiety. They can also help relieving some of the symptoms that the patient might be experiencing, such as, relieving some heartburn or gastric reflux if they are having any upset stomach from the stress or anxiety. Caryophyllene, for example, is an antidepressant. So if they are experiencing any depression as a result of their stress or anxiety, it can help a little bit with that as well.
So Manny, tell me a little bit about PTS versus PTSD.
I would be happy to, Mark. This is PTS and PTSD is a very personal, close to the person effect. PTS and PTSD has been reclassified a couple of times. For me personally, post-traumatic stress is manageable to a certain extent. When it becomes unmanageable for me, it's more of a PTSD, a disorder, because it's something I cannot control anymore. I need assistance controlling. However, the reason I suggest that it's so personal is because what triggers PTS is a significant emotional event that is very direct to a person, but that could be anywhere from being in a war zone, that could be getting attacked by a dog, a car accident, seeing somebody else get injured, whatever it may be that triggered that person to create this traumatic stress is what makes it so personal, because not many people can relate other than the effects of PTS or PTSD. Jeff, you want to have any comments on it?
Yes. So I'm in agreement, and they're kind of an interchangeable nomenclature. When people talk about it, they don't know what to say, PTS or PTSD. And to effectively understand it, I liked what you said about being an acute situation. Post-traumatic stress disorder is when you're in an acute PTS moment. And I think a lot of it is just talking about this, having this slide out there, and people understanding and evaluating the both will give them a better understanding of what's happening to them. So.
And in doing so, also when somebody has PTS or PTSD, as you see at the bottom, we're going to go more into terpenes. But if you are dealing with that, the biggest thing for me that I found working with patients, including working with myself, is that you have to be prepared to face that traumatic situation that's causing that stress or stress disorder. And if you're not prepared for that, or if you're using the wrong terpene combination, it can really spike it up more and make it very unobtainable to try to go back into medical cannabis. And one of those to avoid is alpha pinene. That's my biggest one. That's what you'll find in a higher percentage in the product compared to the rest of the terpenes there, but particularly alpha pinene with lighting.
That's a good point.
I agree 100%. And so, like, through my organization, we've helped veterans that through many years and even the older veterans. And this is an excellent point to make, because sometimes when veterans go in, older veterans not understanding cannabis, we try to educate them as best as possible. They go in there with an idea of what they want and get sold an idea of what they need, and it might have this a terpene that doesn't necessarily agree with them. I've had veterans call the 911 because they thought something was going wrong with them. Older veterans, not young veterans. But this is great to talk about, because it's important to treat the symptoms that you have, not just to use cannabis.
Sure.
You have to use the right cannabis. Very good point.
And here is good leveraging that. You brought that up, Jeff. Here's a list of the terpenes that really can help with PTS, PTSD, and it also relates to conditions like anxiety, insomnia, chronic pain, and depression. Manny, from a dispensary level, you've prescribed, or I should say, you've recommended a lot of these.
I have. One of the key factors that I always point out as you look at this slide and all those dots is that you're not going to particularly look for just one and go across, okay, I need this one. It's a recipe of terpenes that come together that really assist you. And it depends on whether you're looking for something that's more relaxing, more uplifting, somewhere in the middle. Do you have to go to work? Are you going to be playing with your children, grandchildren, spending time with your family? All these outside factors or entities actually play a role in which products you're going to use, which is why it's so important in order to get that consultation, whether it's with Marijuana Aware, with Jeff, with myself, at the dispensary. Take the time, get a journal or a little notebook to take notes so we can go over these. But some of the ones that I really like to point out is if it's nighttime or relax time, you're going to look for myrcene as your number one terpene. If it's more daytime, you're going to look at limonene as your number one terpene. And if you're looking for midday, then caryophyllene as your primary terpene. And then the linalool, terpenoline, and borneol are usually going to be supplemental terpenes to those other three, along with probably 15 plus other terpenes that may be in that product. But it will help with anxiety, insomnia, sleep disorders, chronic pain, depression, nightmares, anger, frustration. All these things, it can be managed using medical marijuana.
So I think it's important to say that, not every strain has the same amount of terpenes. So don't think that, oh, I'm an indica guy and I'm only buying indicas, because you might be disappointed in the terpene profile, that it might not give you the symptoms relief that you're actually looking for because of the terpene profile. So there are many ways online. Go ahead.
You brought up a good point, because there are times when I'm working with patients where they'll say medical cannabis doesn't work, and I'll take a look at the product that they're using versus the terpene profile that they should be engaging, and they don't match.
Right.
So if you don't have the right terpene profile, you're not
Right.
providing the right, let's just say, medical benefits to your body. And so
Right.
it's important to get that match that's really out there, of paying it. And you're right. Pay attention to that certificate of analysis, that COA. It'll tell you
Yes.
what's in the product, what's not in the product.
Yes, it's important, because then you'll have, I often say that a bad cannabis experience leads to no more cannabis experiences. So if you can't set a veteran up for success with using cannabis as medicine, a lot of times, especially with older veterans, that's it. They're already skeptical, and they have a bad experience. Then there's no more, and you've lost that. So.
Right. Good point. And I think, Jeff, there's something that really came into play, and this is what, preparing for this webinar, we heard the terms PTSD and PTS, and I know they're interchangeable, but really, there's both from the standpoint of the terminology, I think it's important to point out what we're trying to do is to take away a stigma, but the problem is legally everything's been classified as PTSD.
Yeah, all my medical records say PTSD, my prescription bottles or whatever. I remember saying specifically for PTSD on there, but I think, we as veterans here in the last few whatever years have taken on mental health as a different way. So the social side and stigma, shame, whatever, of having PTSD may be subsiding some, because there is so much more mental health available out there. But cannabis is the best medicine that I've found for dealing with my PTSD. It's not like everything is better. Like, it's not like a cure-all, end-all. It's a matter of management. I'm much more able to manage my symptoms of PTSD, and not get to that point of where I'm in just distressing situations by using pieces of cannabis all day, and all the modalities.
Right. And as you mentioned, Manny, it has to do with, can you control it or not, right?
That's how I personally feel, and how I found it with most of the patients that I consult with. And a bigger part of it, I believe, is that stigma that comes with it. Anybody who I have to mention that I have PTS or PTSD to, I automatically have a guard that goes up to be prepared for their shock, like, oh, let me not get this guy upset or something like that.
Sure.
However, I do think that the more we understand it, and the more that the patients who suffer from PTS are able to manage it properly, makes a huge difference. Because right now, as you also suggested, Jeff, as veterans, even active duty military, the medications that we were being prescribed in order to manage our PTS either made it worse, or it put us into this dopey, nobody wants to be around me type person. So there wasn't any fix. You just knew that you wanted to stay away from somebody who has PTS, and medical marijuana in general, has helped me conquer that stigma with my patients, let alone myself. And I think understanding it would be best.
Not only that, but I think it's put it back into my hands instead of in the hands of some medicine that was, I felt like I had no feelings, and I was a second away from having the only feeling I knew how to express was anger. And I was restricted with 15 pills in the morning, 9 in the middle of the day, 12 at night, all that, to using cannabis now and understanding how I can treat myself to manage the way I was feeling, instead of being no feelings, medicating myself to death. I was over medicated by the VA and undertreated by the VA. There was no communication with like what all this medicine was going to end up doing to my body. I was 100 pounds heavier when I started using cannabis and started coming off of all these pharmaceuticals. So I feel like my body was really starting to shut down. I was swollen everywhere. It was horrible.
Interesting. Well, the point is, it's a personal experience, and I think it's important that we should point that out. So, although research into medical cannabis here in the United States is restricted because it's a Schedule I drug, cancer research has been being done overseas. And 26 years ago, country of Spain built a lab for Dr. Cristina Sanchez just to study cancer and cannabis. And she's been putting out studies ever since then. Out of the 206 types of cancer, she's addressed about 30 of them. So research is being done. We do know that cancer can be addressed by cannabis. cannabis. But I think this is important to point out because there's a lot of different characteristics that cannabis can really address.
So there's kind of two different parts when you're treating cancer with cannabis. One is you're treating the direct effects of that cancer on the body. So that's going to be the malignant cell growth, cell division, and what the cancer is actually doing to the body. So, a patient might be experiencing fatigue, weight loss, bleeding, fever, chills, night sweats from the actual cancer. And then if a patient is being treated for cancer, they may also be experiencing side effects from the chemotherapy, immunotherapy, radiation therapy, or other medically prescribed therapy that their provider has recommended for them. Cannabis is really good at addressing the side effects of those treatments as well. A big thing with cancer is we always want to address pain first and foremost, and there are many, many very helpful terpenes for pain. We're also going to address helping out a chemotherapy product if that is what the provider has recommended. And there are a couple of terpenes that actually augment and kind of assist in the delivery of chemotherapy throughout the body and can make chemotherapy more effective. That would be your caryophyllene, your granule. So you have a couple different ones. And then the potential tumor reduction properties. So we'd be looking at limonene, caryophyllene, and the granule again. And there's a lot of different terpenes that are going to have benefits for the patient for cannabis for cancer treatment, and that again is either the effects that cancer is having on their body or the symptoms that they're having as a result of cancer treatment. Cannabis can help with both of those.
So Jeff, we've covered a lot of material, and Manny, why don't we kind of just wrap it up a little bit? Jeff, give me some key takeaways.
We've been through a lot of stuff, and no pun intended, but all the information's kind of smoky and gray. But
I love it.
The first responders and veterans, we even from the beginning of cannabis use, there's always been a question. So there are legal issues, but there are also legal protections through the Department of Veterans Affairs, through the TSA, through the VFW, through the American Legion. There are policy changes that are out there are trying to be pushed forward that may not change the way cannabis is accessed now, but we're hoping that the rescheduling will help with all aspects of your life: employment rights, gun rights, transportation rights, all kinds of things. So the key takeaways are just be careful. Your best bet is to make sure you know what the rules are and to be legal with it. Have your card legal, have it in your legal container while you're traveling, and protect yourself that way, and understand cannabis before you go and use and then try to defend yourself after that.
Yeah, becoming an informed user is kind of an important part. Are your thoughts on this, Manny?
I completely agree. One thing that I would just add is that it's not very difficult to get your medical marijuana card, and although that we provided all this information, it seems a little daunting. My biggest takeaway from all this would be that it's pretty much the same as any other prescription medication, unfortunately, although it shouldn't be. It's a recommendation. However, you're just not as protected because it's a recommendation and not a prescription. It's federally illegal, but there's changes coming.
Sure. I think that's important. And I should point out that if anybody has any questions, because there is, again, this is such a flux environment that's in flux, talking about the grateful veterans, right, and contact you and you can help them at least with any particular issues they might have. Is that correct?
100%. They can contact me for whatever. If they need their card, we do all of that. We help them get their card. If they want to become a member, we have events and different locations where gatherings and people can get together and talk about their medicine. And so we try to get a veteran that has never had cannabis, educate them, get them to a doctor, get them to the right dispensary, get them the right medicine, and then deal with them on a regular basis if they have questions. If they don't have questions and they want to be part of, they come. I see them around at different events, and it's great when a veteran comes up and says, my shirt said "Cannabis saves lives" on the back, but a lot of people come up and say it saves so many other things like my marriage and my job and
sure. Things like that.
Yes,
and I should point out that not only do you help veterans, but you will help first responders as well.
Yeah. So when I say veteran, I include the heroes at home, because like first responders and firemen and police officers, EMS do something that I can't even fathom. And I did 20 years in the Navy, so I really respect that service at home. It's got to be nerve-wracking to go knock on the door of a 911 hang up or see a fatality or deal with the things that they deal with on an everyday basis.
Yeah.
And some of them do it for not much money.
Yeah.
So I include them. If you're retired or no longer in the first responder community and you can still show that you were, I will get you a doctor's appointment, just like any veteran. I'll find a doctor that will see you for free, and we raise money to pay that $77.75 state fee. So if you sign up and go through, that's what we'll do for you. If you're out there and you're listening to us, and I'm gonna plug us really hard here, that you want to help a veteran, like I said, it's $77.75 for each one of the veterans that we help. And if you so feel inclined, please click that donate or take a picture of that QR code and donate to us. We've been in operation since 2018, and I think we're close. In November last year, we saw 75 veterans. So
fantastic.
We're doing amazing work here, and I'm so proud of all the people that have helped us. Even, we team up with all the different dispensaries and doctors' offices as much as we can.
Yeah, and the point is, you've been growing as well. That's
important. We're growing. Yeah, for sure.
And Manny, you're another organization folks can contact as well. Although you're not veteran focused, you're focused on really helping people in general with medical cannabis.
I am. Although I do have some expertise as a veteran myself, I do reach out to local VFWs and American Legions, anywhere I could get involved in. A little complicated on the basis, but otherwise I do service the general public. And basically what we do is facilitate discussions, whether it's personal, whether it's group, whether it's like a telemedicine conference, and we help facilitate the discussion towards the needs of the person or group, because everybody's an individual and everybody needs specific assistance. And we are now looking to partner with a physician as well in order to provide recommendations and assistance with registering with the state in order to get your license to be assisted. I've worked with a few dispensaries. I've worked at a few dispensaries, opened up a couple. I've opened up a medical marijuana clinic for a physician in Pensacola. So I'm pretty experienced. I started around 2018, but the blunt joint became reality in about 2022. Mm-hmm. And we're always happy to help. You could visit us at thebluntjoint.life, or you could reach me personally at staylifted@thebluntjoint.life.
Great. Any final thoughts, gentlemen?
Oh, I just wanted to say thank you, gentlemen, and to all our audience for watching. Jeff, I love listening to you speak and hearing all the information to Grateful Veterans. Mark, always a pleasure. Happy to help our audience. And if you need help, please reach out. Check us out online. Follow our webinars and our snippets. We're always here and happy to help.
Jeff, your thoughts?
I was going to say the same. Manny, thank you so much. I loved hearing you speak. It was awesome. Mark, these webinars you do, I think, are fantastic for, whether you're an experienced cannabis user or inexperienced cannabis user. There's information in all of these briefings that work well. And I just appreciate the opportunity to be on one and do some work for veterans and first responders with veterans. It just means a lot to me, and I appreciate the time. Thank you so much.
Well, gentlemen, I want to thank you both for joining me, and Amy for joining me. This is very important. I think having the perspective of someone from the service is really very important, and it's important that we really help those people that have really helped us. If you like this, if you enjoy what you're seeing here, please like and subscribe. It helps our channel out. I do want to point out we have other videos on Marijuana Aware, and of course our series every Wednesday night on different subjects. We'll be having a new set of videos coming out next quarter. And then, of course, if you want to get a card, Medical Marijuana Treatment Clinics of Florida. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Thank you, Manny. Thank you, Amy. And thank you, Jeff. And more importantly, thank you, first responders and veterans, for doing the job that you did. We really respect and honor what you do, and we hope we can help you get your life back.